You and I both know your biggest enemy is yourself. It's you who sabotages your life and acts in inconsistent ways. For example, being productive is on your schedule today, but you feel like scrolling. So you start scrolling, and while you do so, a voice in your head makes you feel guilty. Brilliant. Thanks, brain. You know you shouldn't overthink that person's text message, but your anger is telling you otherwise. You want to accept the invitation to that event, but your anxiety is telling you no. Surely natural selection got the wiring of us humans wrong. Why can't you just do what you say you will without having to consult the 100 other parts of you that all want different things? But don't just take my word for it. As we learn from psychoanalysis, there are multiple different parts of you that all want your attention. Your shadow wants destruction. Your self wants actualization. Your jester wants sabotage and foolery. Your coward wants escape. And your hero wants the spotlight. And as we learn from neuroscience, there are multiple different brain regions, up here, demanding your attention in each moment of your life, and they all want you to do different things. Your amygdala wants you to freak out. Your dorsal striatum just wants you to do whatever you've done before, and your prefrontal cortex wants you to do whatever will get you closer to your goals. To put it simply, your higher self is always one step behind your lower self. So we wouldn't be wrong to use the cliche of it's you versus you. But what does that even mean? It means you are your own worst enemy because, number one, you don't accept there are multiple different parts of you that all want different things, and number two, you ignore these different parts of you instead of negotiating with them. So instead of working with you, they grow against you, much like an angry child. And these multiple different parts of you, your impulses, desires, emotions, goals and personalities are all sat around the negotiation table called your life. And whatever voice wins at this negotiation table determines the outcome of your life. Every single day. For 7 long years now, I've stood helplessly at my negotiation table of life, trying to get a word in as all the different parts of me are negotiating while I'm trying to say, hey guys, don't think we should be talking about this right now. Impulse, I wanted to be productive today. Why put a sock in it right now until Impulse wins the negotiation and I'm sat scrolling unusual memes again on a Tuesday afternoon whilst feeling incredibly guilty because I wanted to be productive that day. Story of my life, really. I'm not crying. You're crying. But it wasn't until 3 months ago that I finally found a solution to living in self-conflict so that we can instead live in self-harmony. Self-negotiation. Self-negotiation involves treating yourself like a business partner sat across the table from you who wants a better deal. As rude, pushy, demanding and as scary as your counterpart may seem, you must realise you're only going to be able to strike an agreement if you treat your partner with empathy, respect and rapport. As the therapist Josh Burnett says, imagine your mind as a diverse boardroom filled with different voices, each representing various aspects of your personality, values, fears and desires. Self-negotiation involves inviting all these voices to the table and allowing them to express themselves openly and honestly. It's about understanding the needs and motivations behind each voice and finding a way to harmonise conflicting interests to reach resolutions that benefit your overall well-being. In a business negotiation context, you wouldn't completely ignore what your partner is saying for fear they might agree now but then undermine the deal later on. You wouldn't scream and shout to get your point across for fear that that would diminish the rapport between you both. Nor would you submit to their wants and needs at the expense of yourself because that would ruin your character. No. Ideally, you'd approach the deal with the mindset of finding an agreement that satisfies both parties whilst maintaining the rapport between you both. So this is the first step to developing your tool of self-negotiation so you can build this coherent relationship with yourself. You must first realise you are not a unified whole. There are many different parts of you. And then you must also realise, despite how great it would be to never have to reason with yourself, you're always going to be sat at the self-negotiation table. Additionally, to become a master self-negotiator, you must steer the ship on which all of these parts of you are crew members of, and you must return to the ship's helm whenever chaos breaks out, so that you can gain better perspective of your crew members and observe their actions and needs. But back to the real world. This is all easier said than done. Again, you don't need me to remind yourself that the hardest person to reason with is yourself. So whether you want to become more focused, stop a bad habit, control your impulses and emotions better, or otherwise just live a conflict-free relationship with yourself, we're now going to finalise this video with 5 quick and easy things you can learn instantly to sharpen your tool of self-negotiation. Go into the balcony, finding your BATNA, reframing your picture, respecting even if, and giving and receiving. Oh, tell me more. But before we get into those 5 tips, let's quickly zoom out to consider the bigger picture here. One of the most well-known negotiation books ever written is Get Into Yes by William Ury. In the book, originally published in 1981, Ury explores how to invite others into a sense of collaboration while negotiating, rather than falling into the gridlock of a win-lose deal, where each person tries to win, but at the expense of the other. But after seeing the book's worldwide success, Ury then published a follow-up book in 2016 titled Get Into Yes with Yourself, after he realised the main barrier we face when negotiating with another person isn't the other person, it's ourselves. If you fail to negotiate first with your desires, wants and needs, you've lost the negotiation from the get-go. In other words, in order to strike a win-win deal with another person, you must first strike a win-win deal with yourself. And little did Ury know some bald British moustached bloke on the internet would use his techniques as a way to improve his subscribers' mental health. But anyway, here we are. Enough of the chat. Here are the 5 ways to stop being your own worst enemy. Point number 1. Go into the balcony. Returning to our business negotiation example, let's imagine the negotiations between you and your partner are getting heated. You've reached a stalemate and neither of you are agreeing. What's best, while the emotions are still high, isn't to plough forward into the conversation, but instead to step back and to allow you and your partner time to breathe. This is what going to the balcony is, gaining distance from the situation so you can gather perspective and identify the voices, and then listen actively. The bigger picture here is, when negotiating with others, Ury realised, the biggest mistake we make is over-empathising with the other person's wants and needs at the expense of our own. In a self-conflict context, the biggest mistake we make is over-focusing on the conflict itself with a judgmental attitude towards it, rather than focusing on the needs these different parts of us in conflict want to meet. For example, it's much easier to judge yourself for wanting to scroll rather than understanding that part of you that wants to scroll for a reason. But let me give you a more detailed example here. Let's imagine you've woken up in a foul mood. You've got a to-do list up to your ears, but the thought of tackling it seems impossible. So as you're lying, paralysed in bed, you reach for your phone to give yourself some emotional relief. But one part of you knows, deep down, continuing to scroll will get your day off to a bad start. So instead of judging yourself for now having your phone in your hand, you pause the decision of whether to continue scrolling or not and go for a quick walk around the block to clear your head and identify the voices. Start by recognising the different voices within you with an attitude of curiosity and inquiry. Remember, not judgment. And do so by asking, who's at the negotiation table right now? What voices are currently in conflict? In our example, this might sound like, so I'm not feeling it today. My monkey mind just wants to go on my phone all day, but deep down, my higher reasoning will make me feel guilty for scrolling. It's important, if you can, to put a name on the voices in conflict within you, because what you can name, you can tame. If you want some inspiration here, take a leaf out of Professor Steve Peters' book, The Chimp Paradox, and attribute the name of the chimp to any voice within you that leans more towards an impulsive, short-term and an emotional characteristic, and the other voice that speaks more logically, rational and of higher reasoning as your human. So after you've identified the voices, you need to then listen actively. But most importantly, you want to invite these different voices to reveal, what need does this part of you want to meet? For example, what does my monkey mind hope to achieve by scrolling? Relief from stress and discomfort. And then what does my human hope to achieve with deep work? Productivity and progress. If you're struggling to find the underlying need of a particular voice within you, just keep asking the question why until you get to the root of the problem. For example, I want to scroll. Why? Because I can't be bothered to work. Why? Because I don't have the energy. Why? Because I don't feel motivated. Why? Oh, because the tasks on my to-do list seem too intimidating. So the underlying need is stress relief. But why is doing this important? It's because by highlighting the underlying need this part of you wants to fulfill, rather than just the action it wants you to perform, you open yourself up to multiple different options of how to fulfill this need, i.e. solve the problem, which will help you with finding your BATNA in point number 2. That's coming next. If we take this part of you that wants to scroll, we've highlighted the underlying need it wants to fulfill is stress relief. If you then take that need and put it at the forefront of your mind when trying to solve this conflict, you can realise, oh, there's multiple different actions I could take to fulfill the need of stress relief. But if you were just focused on the solution that this part of you in conflict is suggesting, which is, I want to scroll, take the action of scrolling. There's only one way to fulfill the action of scrolling. You have to scroll. Now that might have sounded a little bit complicated. So to demonstrate this 1 point further, here's a quick example. Imagine there are 4 women living in a house, and they all share one car between all 4 of them. But one day, it just so happens, they wake up and all 4 of the women need to use the car at the same time. One woman needs to drive to work, the other has a dentist appointment, the third wants to go to the beach, and the 4th woman wants to go shopping. So over the course of a morning, they're all arguing, saying, oh, I need the car more than you, no, my reason is more valid, and they're getting nowhere in their negotiation. They've reached a disagreement because they're all focusing on one action, which they have perceived as the solution, I need the car and you don't, rather than understanding the needs they're trying to fulfill, which is transport. As soon as the women understand they're all trying to fulfill the need of transport, they can realise, oh, the car isn't the only solution. You can call a friend and get a lift. You can walk. You can bike. You can take a bus. So by uncovering the need of the problem, be it with yourself or with other people, you instantly solve the conflict. So after you've gone to the balcony, given yourself distance from the conflict by going on a walk or whatever way you would like to go to the balcony, this now leads you into point number 2, finding your BATNA. So let's imagine you're on a walk and you've highlighted that there are 2 parts of you in conflict. Your monkey mind, which just wants you to scroll the day away to fulfill the need of stress relief and escaping discomfort, and your human, which wants you to spend the day productively to fulfill the need of progress and productivity. So what's your BATNA then? Your BATNA stands for your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It's the solution that would satisfy both parties in conflict and, better yet, introduce them to options they haven't yet considered. Because these 2 parts of you in conflict, just like stubborn human beings, are rooted in their arguments. They've already suggested their solutions to you in the form of actions, as if to say, just ignore everyone else at this table, just listen to me, I know best, we just need to do this action because this is what I want. But they don't even understand the underlying need they're trying to fulfill with this action, which is your job to bring those needs to the table so you can invite everyone who is in conflict into a state of collaboration. But back to our example, you've realised one part of you wants to scroll on the internet to meet the underlying need of stress relief. One part of you wants to knuckle down on focused deep work to meet the need of productivity. So now you've highlighted your 2 needs, stress relief and productivity. Then sidestep the blame game by asking, what could I do to fulfill both of these needs? Then your answer to that question is your BATNA. But a quick word of warning here. Make sure you ask what could I do, not what should I do. Because as we covered in the last video, if you watched it, I appreciate you, you're an OG supporter. When you ask what could I do, you expand your mind into a multiplicity of creative options. When you ask what should I do, you constrict yourself into a moralistic judgment. But in this case, your solution could be strategizing to tick off half the things on your to-do list so as to satisfy your human's needs of progress, whilst making your work environment as comfortable and stress-free as possible, so as to satisfy your chimp's needs of stress relief. For example, you could make a cup of tea to drink while you work, eat while you work, listen to cool music in the background, or only work in 20-minute intervals, stop after 5 intervals, and then scroll on YouTube. The alternative to this would be completely ignoring one part of you in favour of another. For instance, completely ignoring your chimp brain in favour of your human so you can just knuckle down and do focused deep work. But whatever you ignore will grow against you, with a resentment. Hence we have phrases like revenge, bedtime, procrastination. Much like a business partner who would initially submit to you out of fear, would then undermine the deal later on, so too these parts of you will act in the same way if you ignore them. To give you one more example of going to the balcony and finding your BATNA, let's zoom out of the context of deep work and take a quick look at social anxiety. Let's imagine for the last 6 months you've been learning Italian. So you finally book a trip to Italy and you go there as a tourist, and now you're stood in the main town centre of a lovely, small, cosy, sunny Italian town. And you're feeling happy and confident in yourself to be able to practice your Italian, which you haven't had an opportunity to do so yet because you arrived yesterday. So you look around at the town around you and all of the other tourists and you think, okay, what are my opportunities to practice Italian here? And then you see a cafe in the distance about a 1-minute walk away. So, plucking up your courage, you start walking towards the cafe, meditating on, I'm going to go in there and woo everyone with my ability to speak Italian. But then a thought flashes through your mind of the potential embarrassment that could come your way if you fumble your words in front of natives. And suddenly your feet stop moving. And that confidence you had 30 seconds ago is nowhere to be found. And a wave of anxiety overcomes your body and pulses throughout your muscles, creating a lump in your throat. You're now in conflict. So you take a moment before you go into this cafe and you apply everything you've learned from self-negotiation. You need to go to the balcony, detach yourself from the situation. So before you go into the cafe, you stand there and take a quick moment to consider, okay, what parts of me are currently in conflict? The familiar culprits. It's the chimp and the human. What needs are these parts of me trying to fulfill? Well, the chimp is making me feel anxious. Why would it do that? Because it wants to fulfill the need of avoidance from a potentially dangerous or embarrassing situation. My human, on the other hand, is making me feel annoyed with the fact I feel anxious. Why would it do that? Because it wants to fulfill the need of accomplishment. It just wants me to practice Italian with anyone so I can increase my confidence. So that's your two needs, avoidance and accomplishment. Now you strategize to find your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. You ask, how could I best meet both of these needs to satisfy both parties? So you ignore the cafe for a second, you scan your environment again, searching for your solution, but in the distance you see a tourist office. And you realise, people in tourist offices are usually very helpful. The idea of going in there and speaking to someone in Italian seems much less intimidating than facing this cafe right now, which is freaking me out. My solution could be I could go in there, ask someone a quick question in Italian whilst letting them know, by the way, I'm practicing now, so don't judge me for my Italian, so I can fulfill the need of avoiding the cafe for a second, but I can prove to myself that I'm not chickening out. And I can soothe my chimp into the realisation that we are much more capable than we think we are. And I can fulfill the need of accomplishment, i.e. speaking to someone in Italian, so that when I come out of that tourist office with my newfound confidence, I can then reassess whether I want to face the cafe or not. Thank you for joining me on our trip to Italy. Here are 3 more things that will help you find your BATNA. Number 1, establish priorities. Set clear priorities based on your values and long-term vision. Use these as a guiding compass during the negotiation process. Number 2, seek common ground. Look for commonalities and shared goals among the different voices. Even in conflicting desires, there might be underlying needs that align. Number 3, ask, what am I willing to do? If time is against you and you're working towards a deadline, but one part of you isn't on board for whatever reason, consult that part of you individually and question, what is it willing to do? In the context of deep work, let's imagine you're procrastinating for whatever reason, consult that part of you, maybe your chimp that is procrastinating, and ask, what are you willing to do? Are you willing to work for 2 minutes? And then when you work for 2 minutes, reassess. Are you now willing to work for 5 minutes? Then reassess. Are you now willing to work for 30 minutes? In the context of social anxiety, you're out walking on the street or you're at an event, your chimp is going haywire, consult it individually. Ask, what are you willing to do? Are you willing to give one passerby eye contact? Are you willing to smile at one person of the opposite sex? Are you willing to start one conversation with one person tonight and nothing else? But how long will it take for you to find your BATNA? Could take 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, 5 or 30 minutes. But you'll be able to tell when you found it because those parts of you in conflict will finally quieten down, and you'll feel as if all the parts of you are now on board and you're working in unison. But regardless of how long it takes or how silly and strange it might seem to do a process such as this with yourself, by taking the time to self-negotiate, that could be the difference between you living consistent days of peace and unison, rather than wasteful days of useless guilt and revenge bedtime procrastination. But before we finalise this video with a caveat and a final word of warning, here are 3 quick and helpful tips that will also aid your self-negotiation. Number 3. Reframe your picture. Conflicts break out in a negotiation when both people want to reach a win-win deal by increasing the size of the pie, but they do so with a scarcity mindset, believing the size of the pie is fixed in size. So the conflict becomes, how can I protect my part of the pie and win yours, i.e. win-lose? So the solution to this is to not view your self-negotiation as a contest in which one part of you wins and another part loses, but as a collaboration. Despite what we said at the beginning of this video, you are not an enemy to yourself. You're an ally. When you adopt this approach, you'll notice multiple different options for collaboration open up. Point number 4. Respect them even if. Speaking of treating yourself like an ally and not an enemy, you can break the cycle of attacking and rejecting yourself by instead treating yourself with respect and inclusion. You'll naturally be doing this anyway by treating yourself with the spirit of inquiry and curiosity to find the underlying needs that each part of you wants to fulfill, but it's worth mentioning again so you can form this approach towards yourself as an attitude. And ultimately, never forget, self-negotiation is a process of growth and self-discovery, but it can only be facilitated by compassion and patience. Point number 5. Give and receive. The principle of treating others how you'd like to be treated works with yourself as well. By enacting the integrity to first negotiate with these different parts of you in conflict and then follow through on your promises to these different parts of you, will quieten them down and allow them to come on your side as if they're being invited to do so. Much like a dog that is hostile towards you at first, but then calms down and softens up after you pat it on the head, give it a treat and call it a good boy. So that is the process of self-negotiation as a whole. 2 realizations and 5 techniques you might find useful. The 2 realizations were, number 1, you are not a unified whole. There are many different parts of you that all want different things. And number 2, you must realize it's your responsibility to self-negotiate to get those many different parts of you in conflict into a state of collaboration. The 5 techniques were, number 1, go to the balcony. 2, find your BATNA. 3, reframing your picture. 4, almost forgot that then, respecting even if. And finally, number 5, give and receive. Before we end with one self-negotiated word of warning, here's the quick caveat. If you're finding yourself self-negotiating the same thing every single day to no success, you'd benefit more from setting rules and habits. To elaborate, trying to control your behaviour is hard. We all know this. So too is making decisions. But most people make the mistake of trying to control their behaviour by making the same decisions every single day. For example, should I eat healthy today or not? I don't know. Should I work out today or not? I don't know, I'm feeling pretty tired. Should I get dressed and go for a walk today, or sleep in, put Netflix on, make a grilled cheese sandwich and spend the whole day picking my nose? Don't know who put that down, that sounds like a good day to me. A better alternative, however, is to set rules. That way you don't have to waste your energy making the same decisions every day, and instead you can follow a system that is primed for consistency. The bigger picture here is this. The standard way of changing your behaviour is to set a goal, work towards it, achieve it, and then default to your old behaviour. For example, you wake up, you ask yourself, should I work out today? You decide, suppose. You go to the gym and work out. Then each day after that, you keep asking yourself the same question until one day you answer no. Suddenly 2 weeks have passed and you haven't been to the gym. On the other hand, setting rules leaves no time for questioning. You set the rule and you follow it. End of. For example, some rules could include, I work out each day unless I'm severely injured. I only watch 2 educational YouTube videos per day at 7 PM. I only eat dessert on Fridays. I don't check my phone in the mornings until I've done 3 things. For each new thing I buy, I get rid of 1 old thing. The energy you reclaim from the rules you set that you would be spending on making the same decisions each day can now be allocated towards other things in your life. Setting rules also gives you clear feedback on whether you've broken them or not, meaning if you ever feel randomly guilty throughout the day, you can use that as feedback to check whether you're living in line with your rules or not. If you're not living in line with them, you're likely going to feel guilty. But if you feel a surge of positive emotion and as if you're doing the right thing at the right time, take that as the feedback that you're following and living in line with your rules. But if the word rules doesn't work for you, consider the term healthy self-boundaries, as the author Nedra Glover Tawwab, can never say her name, says in her book Set Boundaries, Find Peace. The ability to say no to yourself is a gift. If you can resist your urges, change your habits and say yes to only what you deem truly meaningful, you'll be practicing healthy self-boundaries. It's your responsibility to take care for yourself without excuses. So my questions to you are, in what areas of your life could you trade constant decision making for a rule? How could you organise your life so upholding that rule is as easy and attractive as possible? That was the caveat. Now here's the final word of warning on self-negotiation. Outside the realm of rules, you must always keep your skill of self-negotiation sharp. Because no matter how peaceful your internal harmony and unison feels right now, I can guarantee you more disagreements are coming in the future. But that's not to worry, because with your sword of self-negotiation sharpened, you'll be well equipped to go to the balcony and then find your BATNA when those disagreements come. In the words of William Ury, self-negotiation comes down to dedicating ourselves to a strong, unconditional commitment to ourselves to take care of our deepest needs, no matter what other people do or don't do. And always approach it through the mindset of maintenance rather than completion. You're going to have to self-negotiate many times throughout your life. You're not going to wake up one day and realise, oh, I've completed the game of self-negotiation and I never have internal conflicts. No. This is likely going to be a daily practice. I'll be right there with you doing it myself. Anything else? My final questions to you are, what could your version of going to the balcony be? How could you better remind yourself to self-negotiate throughout the day? And what is something you need to self-negotiate on right now? Let me know your answers to those questions in the comments down below. Because who knows? Someone else watching might see your comment and find it very useful. That said, thank you very much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it, because this video was slightly longer than usual. Anyway, stay disciplined, playful, and dangerous. Adios, muchachos y muchachas. This is the thing with the UK. It's as grey as my left bollock outside, but some bloke has woken up and thought, oh, I'm going to cut my grass today. Just move to Spain, you knob.